When your ranged DPS is the one tanking and aggroing all the enemies, you know your team is a piece of shit. End of story. Yeah. I mean, of course, if we look at many different variables, it's because Momonga, his presence just aggroes all the enemies towards him, but still, like, you know he's a one-man army, one-man team, and the team behind him isn't shit compared to him when he's just sitting there tanking the enemy, one-shotting them, and being a beast as a ranged DPS, because we do know he's like a necromancer, he's a spellcaster. So, yeah. Now that I got that out of the way, I'm just gonna say right now, I actually took a look at the light novel. Yes, I actually read the first couple chapters of the light novel of Overlord just to see how Madhouse is handling, you know, the anime of Overlord, because I've been told that there is some things they skip out, but when it comes to the presentation and the way Overlord is being made into an anime, it's still pretty much the same. So I decided to just take a look and see how the light novel equivalent of Overlord is, and see how it was. So far, from what I can see, I noticed a couple of details they've cut out, but it's still true to what the series' actual meaning is. Overlord still has that life that the light novel has from what I have read so far, so it's very good to actually note that, because I personally went on my way to actually see if, you know, the light novel is kind of similar to the anime. Of course, there is some details cut out, but hopefully those will be added on later on when they become very vital to the plot. But for now, instead of getting onto that, let's, you know, talk about this episode. So, am I the only one that is thinking that the ending part of this episode, when you saw that necromancer dude saying, like, he's wanting to turn this city into the undead, it reminded me a lot of the Anderhall calling. You remember when the undead came into the town of Anderhall in Warcraft 3, and then they killed the entire city and turned them to undead, and then also that's what happened to Strutholm? I remember a lot of these type of vibes from that game, and then also seeing this in this episode. It just reminds me so much of it, because this dude is trying to turn the entire town into undead. He's a necromancer, and the way he's going about it is he wants to turn into an undead as well. So, it's pretty fucking crazy when you start looking at all these different details. It just reminds me a lot of some games I played through my life, and to see how it reminds me of some of these RPGs or strategy games and good stories, it's shocking. But yeah, that ending sequence, that is definitely going to lead into something with Momonga, because we do know Momonga, he's like some form of necromancer, because he can summon a Death Knight, and we saw what he could do a couple episodes back, and so he can summon the undead and stuff like that. And with this dude kind of trying to summon undead, like, he created undead. Like, we know he's a necromancer. He created undead, he wants to turn the town into, like, undead, and he also wants to, like, get power and turn into some form of undead. We know what he's going for. So, I feel like there's going to be a time to where Momonga, he's going to probably meet this guy, and this dude is probably going to look at Momonga if he, you know, Momonga reveals his face that he's undead. I bet that dude is going to just bow before Momonga and worship his ass, because, think about it, this dude seems like he's, you know, worshipping the undead. He wants to become undead and, you know, not really die, have, like, immortality. And if you saw someone like, you know, Momonga, looked at him when he's, like, kind of worshiping that type of stuff, you'll be like, oh my god, this dude is going to worship Momonga. So I could see that dude becoming some form of ally in the future. I really can. I could see that dude becoming a very powerful ally, an asset to Momonga's fighting force if shit goes down. Because we do know there's probably going to come a time, judging by the way this episode is done, that there's probably going to come a time to where people are going to find out more about Momonga. They're going to find out about his face, his true appearance. And if they find out about his appearance, that's not going to be good, because let's look at this from a perspective as us humans, okay? When we don't understand something, like when we're introduced to a new environment or something new we don't understand, like a new race, creature, whatever, depending on the history of human beings, we would destroy or think that's our enemy, or we would kind of put it down because we don't understand it. That's the natural human being way. That's how we all act. And if you think about it, if someone saw like someone walking around like Momonga, a skeleton, walking around humans, they realize this, they're gonna look at him as if he's a monster, a beast, need to get the fuck away, let's call the church, you know, different things like that. They'll do all sorts of things they could do to get this guy away. And so I feel like when they finally find out that Momonga is an undead skeleton, he doesn't need to eat, he doesn't need to sleep, he doesn't really need to rest or anything. I mean, he could just be immortal for the rest of his life and do his own shit. this dude is probably going to be looked at as a freak of nature, and people are going to instantly probably try to kill him because he's some form of demon. I mean, that's the general reaction you would get if you saw something like that. Now, I could see why Momonga is hiding his face, because after reading the light novel now, I kind of know a little bit more about Momonga's personality that isn't so obvious in the anime. I did not realize that Momonga is kind of untrusting as a person. Like, this is not necessarily a bad thing, because it's not really shown obviously in the anime, because they might be just trying to give a new life to it. But in the light novel, since you can hear the thoughts of, the characters, because you get to see the inner psyche of individual characters when they're thinking, so we get to hear Momonga what he thinks. We get to find out he's not very trusting as a person. Like, he looked at everybody in the Great Tomb of Nazarick as if they were his enemies at first. He did. And thinking about that, looking at this situation, I could only imagine what he's probably thinking in his mind right now while he looks at these human beings around him, and these people that most likely can instantly turn against him and fuck him over. I mean, if these guys found out Momonga's secret, and when they start spreading this information into the towns, he'd be fucked on collecting information. I mean, of course, he can, erase memories, or he can kill them all off if they find a secret, but we'll see what type of character he has as it continues on. So, getting back on topic to this episode. So, the majority of this episode is kind of building up Momonga's character and showcasing that he might eventually form a team that will meet the expectations of what he used to have. As we know, before the game got shut down and before the game turned into real reality, we know he had this team. He had this guild. He loved his guild. His guild and him used to go on quests all the time. They used to do so much to be able to accomplish what they wanted. They had barely any time to play, but they used, like, their work days when they got free or off. They would usually go and play this game. And so they played so much, got together, and they became one of the best guilds in existence, probably the best guild in existence. And to see that, it's very sad when you think about it from a perspective of that friendship he had is gone. I mean, some might look at it as like if it doesn't really matter, because I mean, it's just people online, but you could still make friends online. I mean, if you spend hundreds of hours with a specific person online, and you talk with them day after day, you communicate with them, you play games with them, you're going to grow a great bond with that type of person. You will, no matter if you see their face or not. And so he grew these bonds with so many people, and then eventually, they're gone, and he could never meet them or talk to them again, because he had this group that always knew what to do, how to do it, and they each shared this connection, and now he no longer really has it. I mean, if you think about it, he does in some way, because each individual NPC, as we know, was kind of made by individual guild members, and so to think about that, I mean, I guess his guild is there in some sense, but they're not really there. So hopefully, the way they're trying to drive this, I feel like they're going to make it to where Momonga is going to start looking at the NPCs that turn into actual living beings as if they were his real allies. For instance, his allies that were kind of like, his friends when he used to play the game. I could see that happening. I really could. And so, I like how Overlord is being done in this episode, because I have to say, it's an entirely different but same experience reading the first couple chapters of the light novel and then watching the anime. It's such a good experience, because I can appreciate the anime so much more after reading a little bit more into Momonga's character and knowing a little bit more about him. I appreciate this series so much more because he's really cool. He's a really cool character that is not actually so simple as how he appears. Now, one thing I want to say about this episode is there is a couple of issues I did notice in this episode when it came to the animation quality, and we do know that sometimes the CGI in Overlord hasn't been the best. I'm not going to deny that. The CGI with some of the, the goblins and ogres in this episode of Overlord didn't look that good. It kind of looked a little bit nasty, but besides that, when it came to the episode, it still retained that standard Overlord animation art that we know since the first episode. Just the only part worthy of note when it came to some bad quality was the CGI when it came to the creatures, but even then on that, it's not nothing too bad like some series in, recent days we have seen. So, episode overall of Overlord this week, fucking great. It was a very good episode. I couldn't ask for any more out of this, and I want to continue reading the light novel, because I'm really enjoying the light novel, and I'm really enjoying the anime, and I mean, I want to see more about the series and learn more, and be able to dive in a little bit deeper into this series, because after reading the light novel, now understanding a little bit more about Momonga's character, of how he is kind of untrusting to some people, it really makes me respect him. And he's also greedy, too. He's very greedy. Like, he loves to hoard things. Like, he loves to hoard wands and potions and shit, which explains why he has, like, you know, that potion a couple episodes back, but that can bring back the dead. He hoards things. And if you think about it in a standard gamer sense, I mean, if you're a gamer and you're playing an RPG or something, of course you most likely would hoard shit, because, I mean, hey, I mean, if you collect these rare items, you would want to hoard them, and I know I would do the exact same thing. I mean, if I'm going through, like, dungeons and shit, and I get a bunch of goods, usually I just throw them in my bank, and I leave them there, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I just got so much equipment in my bank, and I'm like, fuck, I need to get rid of it, but, you know, you don't know what to get rid of, because, you know, there's some good shit in there. So, yeah, I like also finding out about that. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below. You all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.